Alright, we shall start with an apology. If you have clicked this wanting a look at or a review of this, we're at the point in this 6-issue series where the story pretty much stagnates. If you want opinion or insight into this series, the 3 issues before this contain most the points about this. It is an overlong, careless series written by a writer who has no real connection, awareness or understanding of Animals Man as a character. We have got the character having an indecent affair with a much younger woman. At this point, well, all along, the story has been writer Gerry Conway, without any subtlety, writing about himself rather than Animals Man. Gerry Conway, who was onto his 3rd marriage. Gerry Conway, who was getting R's. Gerry Conway, whose relevance in the industry was diminishing. It's one thing if he wanted to write a story about that, but it is another when it is touted as the last days of Animals Man. A character Gerry Conway's familiarity with begins and ends with an issue of Wonder Woman he wrote in the 80s. The shit with Star Fox is unpleasant. Yeah, there is a pull away, Animals Man pulls away. A what am I doing moment. Well, that doesn't change things. You cannot stab a man in the throat and then pull away and have a what am I doing moment. That doesn't undo the stabbing. Gerry Conway had nothing to say about Animals Man, and his story is dragged out across 6 issues when it exhausts any ideas or themes within the first 2. It's not that I have ran out of things to talk about, it's that the comic has ran out of new things to happen. If you read the first 3 issues, there's nothing new in issues 4 and 5. Issue 6 at least provides an ending, and the ending isn't awful. It is the best part of the miniseries, but the obstacle of getting to that point isn't worth it. To keep these videos alive, I have been crowbarring in stories about my nemesis. My nemesis is an unsuccessful comedian who I knew in my life as a stand-up comedian. And I actually had an okay relationship with him. I have named him my nemesis as a response to him once introducing another comedian at a gig as his nemesis. He was bitter that that comedian was doing better than him, so he thought it would be cute and funny if he referred to him as his nemesis to an audience who were oblivious to any of this. So he just unprofessionally and pettily introduced another comedian in a way where the audience were effectively told not to like them from the get-go. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for your next act who killed the baby, Johnny Tomorrow. By the way, I chose the colour purple because it is the colour of his dick. Anyway, I've got 3 good stories about my nemesis for this one. Some of them are short, some are long. They will all end up being long. First one is, there was this gig, and the problem I have telling stories about comedy is that there's always more to a story. I can quickly tell this story, but there was a gig is doing it a disservice. It was a comedy/poetry night, ran out of a cupboard for spare chairs in the back of a tiny pub, ran by Ken, that bloke that collected Nazi memorabilia. You know, the one who had a stroke that I ripped off. It was a miserable fucking gig. He would book 20 poets and like 5 comedians, and he thought that having 25 people in attendance equaled an audience of 25 people. Poets are miserable cunts. They do not laugh at comedy. It was a horrible, horrible gig. As for the poetry, here is one of the pieces of poetry I heard performed at this gig. Nigel Farage, he doesn't even own a garage. He's just a cunt. Anyway, my nemesis was on this gig, but also so was this other guy. See, there's so much stories to tell. The other guy is worth a long history dump in his own right. But we will ignore who he was or any of his foibles or quirks. He was on before my nemesis. He did this ad pat joke. Me and the missus have finally agreed to tie the knot. We're giving bondage a try. It's an hard one. Not wrong with it. It's been done. It's fine. Then my nemesis went on, and this was amazing because it's such a tiny room, and it demonstrated how little attention he pays to anyone but himself. He opened with, the first thing he said to the audience was, "I've got some good news. Me and the girlfriend, we're going to tie the knot. That's right. We're going to give BDSM a go." I was creasing myself laughing at how awful it was. He was in a tiny cramped room and he wasn't even paying attention to the other comedians, but he was expecting everyone to pay attention to him. Me and another comedian were the only ones laughing, and he smugly proclaimed, "Well, at least somebody got it." We will come back to that gig, but this comic rambles on. We have those crappy new villains, Blood Rage and Prismatic. And the next 3 issues are a non-stop barrage of these rubbish bad guys, walking all over every hero they encounter. We have already had Animals Man lose to them. We saw that in the earlier issues of this series. We see that again here. But it is the treatment of all the other characters, Starfox in this one, and the Justice League, which includes Superman in the next one. They are humiliatingly trounced by these new villains. At that same gig, Reet, I need to start by announcing he is not. He is not. He did a joke and he prefaced it with a minute-long defence of why it is okay for him to do this joke. He said, "Some people think this next joke is racist, but not everyone knows that I am actually half Asian. My race is half Asian. I am Asian, so it's all right for me to do this next joke. Remember, I am Asian myself. I know I don't look it, but I am authentically half Asian by DNA." He's not. He's really, really not. He rambled on for a full minute just establishing that he was half Asian. And then the joke was, I need to explain. Cilla Black, she is a Scouse woman that hosted tacky TV shows in the 80s and 90s. One was called Surprise, Surprise. Have you heard that famous Hollywood celebrity Cilla Black has recently opened up a stationery shop in China? That's right, it's called Surprise, Surprise. The great thing is, immediately after he told that joke, I turned to Joby McGean and pointed out that joke didn't even need the racial element. You can tell that joke. Cilla Black has opened up a new stationery shop called Supplies Supplies. The Chinese people say the letter R instead of L shit is completely unnecessary for it. Afterwards, I asked him if he really was Asian, and he maintained that he was, and that his name had been anglicised, which was very funny. Animals Man gets creamed by Blood Rage. I don't know what an Animals Man fan is meant to enjoy about this story. We have established he is a loser in every conceivable way. Anything that was once likeable about Animals Man has been tossed aside for Gerry Conway's misery and misogyny. He is beaten so severely, he has hallucinations of his family, his mistress, and his daughter's lesbian girlfriend who he only met in passing in the previous issue. Then, Animals Man, he kicks the bad guy in the bowels. I wish someone had kicked Gerry Conway in the bowels when he presented a script where Animals Man, an aging over-the-hill Animals Man, has an affair with the much younger Star Fox. This is a special one, and it doesn't reflect well on me either. I ran a gig for years. The longest running comedy night in Newcastle, I'll have you know. It's not anymore. It was a fucking nightmare. Here is my top tip for dealing with someone like my nemesis. I was aware he was a bit of an arsehole, that he felt like he deserved gigs. How you deal with that is you present a front of being on their side. You pretend to be their ally. It's easier to give him a gig every now and then than not give him any and have him whinge all the time. I did give him gigs. That's part of why it's funny that for the first 2 years that I knew him, he would always introduce himself to me like we had never met before, when we blatantly had, because I'd booked him to do the exact same gig like 3 weeks earlier. One time it was a wash, the gig. It was a complete wash. Hardly anyone there. That was often the case near the end. Winter, though. I think this is either morally grey or horrible. I would try to fill up the audience with homeless people. Yeah, not a good look for me. I would go and find a homeless person, ask them if they wanted a drink, and then I would let them into a warm room for a couple of hours. I should have done what the bloke before me did, which was go to the gay bar down the street and get a bunch of hot, muscly gay men to stand at the back of the room looking intimidating. The homeless people were generally okay with it. I would pay for their drinks. They would sit and watch. Sometimes it worked out. Other times it didn't. This guy, he was okay. He sat near the back and he chuckled a few times. Then my nemesis went on and he started doing his typical rubbish like Merkel Fastbender, Native New Orca, and the homeless man got up and left after like 30 seconds. I assumed he had just had enough, he was sick of it or he had stuff to do. He came back 20 minutes later, and I said to him, I thought we had lost you for the night. And he replied, no, I'd just rather be out in the freezing cold for another 15 minutes than listen to that one twat's awful dad jokes. An actual homeless man would prefer to be out on the street on a really cold night than have to sit through my nemesis's act. Now that's what I call a kick in the nuts. I hate Star Fox's role in this miniseries. It is terrible. She isn't a character. She isn't Tret-like a character. She is there to be two things that expose Gerry Conway's age and lack of growth as a writer. She is a sex object for the male character, and she is a victim for the male character to save. Star Fox, she is threat like nothing. If you're a fan of Star Fox, this is insulting. Her powers seem insignificant. Her skills, she appears to be useless. She gets stomped all over by this Mirror Woman villain. And I have always insisted on Gerry Conway being bad at writing women. And he hasn't really changed an inch since the 70s. He's maybe gotten worse because now it comes with an extra dose of perviness because he's older. Star Fox is nearly beaten to death, and this is despair for the male character. And what do you expect from a writer whose main accolade is killing a woman off? Don't recommend this miniseries. I probably already said that in another one though. That's right, it's 7 thumbs up.